how you think about fitness reflects what you think about life. Hear me out. This is a great metaphor or analogy for life. Because how you think about fitness, and if you can translate that over to the other domains in life, will drastically impact the success you have or don't have. And what I found, I was on Brad Lee's podcast, Dropping Bombs, and we were talking about why you have fit people that are broke. They can't seem to get themselves to have discipline in other areas of their life. They've got discipline when it comes to fitness, and yet they don't extrapolate those principles and realize the principles of fitness are really just the principles of life. And what it really does is it reflects your own thinking about life back to you. So how you think about fitness is oftentimes the problem that holds people back. Think about if you were fit, if you had the body that you dreamed of, and maybe you do, maybe you don't on the other side of the camera, but think about if you had the body that you dreamed of. Where could you be? What could you have? Who could you be? Would you have the respect you want, the status you want? Would you feel the emotions of elation and excitement? Would people come up to you and talk to you all the time? What would your social status be in your peer group? See, that's really reflective because people's thinking about fitness is what oftentimes holds them back from fitness. All they think about and all they focus on is, oh, I have to go to the gym, and oh, this has to be hard, and oh, there's all this work. But isn't life really the same way? I mean, life requires work. I think it was Grant Cardone that said, it's hard to be rich. It's also hard to be poor. So if I have to have the two, I mean, work hard and be rich, right? And the same is true with fitness, and it's true with life in the sense that people focus on all the things that hold them back, and they don't focus on the small things that they can do to get massive results. Now, it's my theory that you have half, probably more, of the fitness population in this country that are overtraining. And that'll piss some people off because people like their 3-hour training sessions. They like their, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week at the gym, and they like to virtue signal how fit they are because they can do this. And what they're really doing over time is they're slowing their metabolism down, and they're spending lots of time on something where they get diminishing results. They could get 90%, 95% of the results with a fraction of the time, and they could spend that time elsewhere. And that's really reflective, if you think about it in life, how most people spend their time doing anything or everything. Because we've probably all heard the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. I don't actually agree with that. But what I do think is that the thing that holds people back from fitness and getting the goals that they desire is they haven't figured out the strategic, actionable leverage points to move. And then that's also reflective for their life where they want certain things. They want freedom. They want love. They want connection. They want, health, whatever it may be. They want money. But they haven't figured out the dials to move, because I know people that are working 18 hours a day and they're only getting further and further behind. And I know other people who are working 4 hours a day and they're only getting further and further ahead. So the people that are working 4 hours have figured something out that the others haven't. And that's basic arbitrage, isn't it? It's that they figured out how to get more with less, and the people over here get less with more. That's a basic principle. And the same is true with fitness. You can actually get more with less. I'm currently working out 2 days a week, and you get more with less, whereas the people who are training 3 hours a day, 7 days a week have diminishing results. And it depends on what you're going for here. But this is analogous for life, that how you're thinking about these things is the thing that is really keeping you stuck. It's how you're thinking about life, how you're thinking about the problems. And that's precisely the problem. That's why whenever I start coaching people and we look at their business and say, okay, how would your business look in 3 years if you had everything that you wanted? Most people have no idea. Most people say they'd like to be making more money. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And they're saying, well, I want to increase my gross. And I'm like, you probably want to increase your net. You want to figure out how you can get higher margins. And you want to figure out how you can get higher margins for less while also delivering more. Right? That's the key. Not sacrificing value, not sacrificing quality, but actually delivering more, better, faster, because people will pay for that. They will pay more for better. And the same thing is true in fitness. When you find those things to move, that's the idea of celebrity trainers. That's the idea of people on the high-end spectrum. They cut through all the noise. So you've got this huge swath of personal trainers who know about this much about fitness, and they think because they know a few things and they went through a certification program that now they're experts. And that's just not true. I'll tell you, I've never done a certification program in my life, but I know more than 99% of those trainers. Why? Because I'm obsessed. And that's just a factor. When you talk to obsessed people, they're obsessed about these things. And how people think about fitness is they may be obsessed with fitness, but they don't optimize to all areas of their life. And so you've got other people that are obsessed with business and they let the other areas of their life go. But crossing domains and understanding the foundational principles of what gets you from fitness to successful relationships to success financially in your capital, the principles are underlined. They're all the same principles. These are meta principles. I talk about these in my book. And so I like to use the fitness example because I think people just really don't understand it. They don't actually think, how could my life be better by this? And then they don't focus on the things that could make their life better. The same thing is true with the relationships. They say, oh, I don't have the relationships I want, but when this happens, then I'll have the relationships I want. And I say, no, it's who you become. Who do you have to be to get the relationships that you want? Who do you have to be? Because I believe that we're all the biggest constraint in our own lives. Oftentimes, it's not the information, it's the application of that information, and it's our internal state that determines whether we take the actions that we know we should or that we don't. And that's where a good coach comes in. Because a good coach can get you off the fence to do something that you didn't even know that you could do, but the coach knew that you were capable of that. Now, going back to the idea of fitness, fitness is not difficult. It's actually really simple. And I know there will be people in the comments and they'll say, well, you don't know, I've got a, whatever disorder, and, you don't know because I've got this problem, that problem. And what I would say to those people is, if you want to continue to argue for your limitations will continue to plague you. Do not argue for that which holds you back. That's a simple foundational principle. Don't argue for that which holds you back. And if you want to get results in fitness, if you want to get results in finance, if you want to get results in your love life, in your family life, the same principles apply to almost all of them. You have to identify the tiny levers that move large amounts. That's leverage, just 101. And I'm obsessed with leverage because I'm fairly convinced that's the differentiating factor between people. I mean, if you look at really successful people, and I've studied really successful people a lot, one of the biggest differentiators is just sheer hunger. And hunger is leverage. Hunger is an emotional insatiability. They're just hungrier than other people. They're oftentimes not smarter. They may not have higher IQs. They may not have greater emotional intelligence, but they're hungrier. And the same is true for fitness. Sometimes you see people outperform people with less genetic predisposition, outperform the person who is genetically superior because they're hungrier. And then if you can translate that hunger, not just from fitness, but into business, into your relationships, you can't be stopped. But the problem is most people can't direct this. Most people haven't taken control of themselves enough to actually direct and get the things that they want out of life. And so they end up building a life that they don't like. And I'm obsessed with this because I watched, growing up, my grandparents had multiple multi-million-dollar businesses. So I grew up in business from a very young age. I was driving a bulldozer doing land development at probably 6 years old, maybe 7 years old, 7 at the most. And I saw my grandparents have a business that it provided money, but they didn't really enjoy it. They hated it. And so because they hated it, because the business owned them. And so they got something and they really sacrificed their soul for this idea of business. And in the end, it left them empty. And so I'm obsessed with building businesses that are intentional, that have value, that are on purpose for people, that are on truth for people. And getting people on truth is one of the hardest things. But once you get people on truth, then they have orientation. Because the problem that most people face is they walk in a gym and they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. Do I start with my chest? Do I start with my legs? Do I start with my calves? And that's most people in life. They don't know where to start in their business. They don't know where to start having better relationships. And I can tell you the place for all of those is to start with yourself. Before you ever walk in the gym, you have to get mentally prepared. I mean, it's really simple. And before you go into starting a business, you have to get mentally prepared. You need to understand that's a principle of sacrifice. Either sacrifice for what you want, or what you want becomes a sacrifice. It's that simple. And fitness is such a great analogy for life because it reflects back to you what you think about life. And so if it has to be hard and you always have to work hard, then you can never get anything without doing just that. But if your definition of working hard is 4 hours a day, well, maybe you can work 4 hours a day and be really successful. I know those people too. It's great. And leverage comes oftentimes for a lot of people through greater knowledge. That's why for the last over a decade, I've read 50 to 150 books a year. Some years I don't read as much, other years I read more. And what I find is that knowledge combined with hunger is probably the biggest factor that sets people apart. Because you have people that are hungry, but they don't have enough exposure. They don't have enough exposure to different ways to work out, of different ways of business, of different ways that relationships can succeed. And because of that lack of exposure, they only know one pattern to go through. And as, somebody who studied people in my 20s, I came in contact, I added it up, I think it was around 250,000 women over the course of about 6 years. I worked in a nightclub, I was a male dancer. And so I got to really study people, like in-depth study people. And I got such exposure to people. How do you keep up with that? Most people are meeting not one new person a day on average. I mean, most people, they have their stable people in their life. And when you have the exposure of hundreds of thousands of women in a very condensed period, you learn to see patterns. You learn to quickly identify different patterns. And what you find is life is just full of patterns. And people in the gym develop certain patterns that allow them to be fit. And then the people who are really great at that, they expand those patterns that made them successful there. And they become successful across multiple domains. And that's the goal, by the way. That's the goal. That's the meta game, is to be successful, not just in the gym, not just with your health, not just with fitness, but also with your capital, with your business, with your connection with love, with relationships, with contribution, your meaning, your purpose. And on the other side of that is where you get happiness, impact, influence, status, power, right? Are you starting to see this? And so, well, this video, like while I talk about fitness, what I really talk about are the fundamentals that make people successful or not successful, because that's what I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with life in general and figuring out the foundational keys that allows somebody like Russell Brunson to do what he does, or Tony Robbins to do what he does, or Grant Cardone to do what he does, or Tim Ferriss to do what he does. And what you find is all the common factors between all of those people, all the common patterns, and then you pick out what works for you, and then you apply that strategically, and that's what I call actionable leverage. Because you can take action on it to create change today so that you can change who you are and your life tomorrow. And that's really the goal of this. And so if you're struggling with fitness, because I started this out with fitness, what I'll say is it's really quite simple. And it starts first in your mind. It starts with making a commitment, understanding a commitment is defined by that which you're willing to sacrifice for it. And if you're not willing to sacrifice for it, then you're not going to have it. And so you don't actually have a commitment. I mean, that is the principle. That is key number one. And so it has to start in the mind. And then you have to realize that upfront it will be complicated unless you find somebody to shortcut that, to compress that, to give you a map for how to do it. But as you go on, I've been lifting for 20 plus years right now. People ask me, like, how do you get so big? And I'm like, well, dude, I've been doing it for 20 years. It's not complicated when you've been doing it for 20 years. If you've been doing taxes for 20 years, it's probably not complicated. If you've been in business for 20 years, you've probably got a lot of things figured out. If you've been an athlete, you know some things. And so it's the power of repetition, and then it's being obsessed with something and having a great degree of commitment towards it. And then you figure it out. And then you take those principles and you understand that it's just a little bit of hard work, or maybe easy work. Maybe it's no hard work. And maybe that's the thing that allows you to go to the next level. Because I guarantee you, if you change your fitness level, I guarantee you the rest of your life can change too. Like, I've seen it time and time again. I've seen guys that have lost 100 pounds. Dude, their sales go up, their business goes up, their relationships get better, they get laid way more. All of this stuff happens. But I also push back against those people because there's a number of people on YouTube and online who say, oh, if you're not fit, you're whatever. That's not true. I don't believe that. I just think that fitness is a foundational principle that allows people to live to the fullest extent that they can. And without it, I think it's very difficult to express yourself to your full capability because you're not allowing yourself to flourish to your full capability. And it's really that simple, that if you're here like me to live a big life, if you're here to do big things, then you want to tap into your potential. You want to actually live life as big as you can. And, okay, so I saw this podcast with Joe Rogan and Dan Bilzerian the other day. And that dude has done some crazy stuff. And I don't know this guy. I don't know anything about him, by the way. I just was like, dude, partying on yachts. I mean, it reminds me of the life that I had when I was a dancer because, like, I actually had celebrity. When people talk about this, like, I could not go anywhere in the DFW area. By the way, there's 8 million people there. I could not go to a mall without being recognized. Literally could not. So, like, I know what celebrity feels like. I know what that feels like. And he just has it on a much higher level than I ever did. And I walked away from that and decided to not really, to divorce myself of that. And now I'm like, you know what? I can talk about it, whatever, totally fine. But I know what this feels like. And because I know what it feels like, I know how cool life can be. And if you will just give yourself permission to go there, that I know life can get so much better than any of us actually realize. And it can be really great. So guys, if y'all want to get fit, just shoot me a message on here, dude. I'll give you some tips. I'll make some specific videos for you if it's just about fitness, but also, like, I'm going to keep making videos to show you how you can apply fitness and really the fundamentals of life to fitness, business, relationships, happiness, love, connection, all of those things, because oftentimes people think it's like doctors when they, if you have a cardiologist or a nephrologist, and they only focus in on one organ, but the truth is they're all really connected. And once you start looking at it in a holistic manner, you can break through and you can find that you can really translate principles over super fast and easy. And then you'll see your life scale at a way that I never believed was possible until I did that in my own life. So guys, hope this helps. Be great, everyone.